In this video, I'm going to show you how you can modify your selections inside of Photoshop. Now, if you're following along to the pairs.psd file, it just has two layers, a single pair and multiple pairs, and I'm just going to use the different layers to show you the different effects that we can do here. So whenever we make a selection, let's say we take this rectangular marquee and we make a selection here, there's different ways that we can actually modify this selection that we made. Of course, if we have another selection tool made and we hold down the shift key, you can add to that selection, and it doesn't have to be touching, it can be over here. So I can make multiple selections by holding down the shift key and being able to add to that selection. Now, if I have a selection tool and I hold down the Alt or Option key, it will subtract from that selection, and again, you can do that anywhere that you want to. So we'll take the Move tool and you can see the places that I subtracted. Now, this is going to work for any type of selection. It doesn't matter if it's with a magic wand, by color range, or a tool. So if we take the lasso tool and we hold down the Alt or Option key and we cut through here, it will remove that. And the same thing, if we hold down Shift and we draw a pattern like this, it'll add to that selection. So Shift and Alt or Shift and Option are going to be your keys to making and deselecting and removing parts of your selections. Now, there's other ways that we can also modify our selections. So I'm going to deselect that. Let me grab the rectangle tool and just draw a rectangle out here. If I go to select, you can see that we have some modifications we can do. First, we can make a border. So it's going to make a border around this selection, and it tells how thick that border is going to be. So if we say 20 pixels, you can see that it not only made the rectangle, but then it added a border above that at 20 pixels. So that might be something that you need to do. Another way that we can modify the selections is we can make it smoother. And what this does is it's going to try to smooth out your selection depending on how jagged or rigid it is. So if we have a sample radius of 100 pixels, it's going to smooth a lot more than say 10 pixels. So we'll crank it up to 100, we'll hit OK, and you can see it's tried to smooth out those corners the best that it can. This is really good if you're using, like, say, a polygonal lasso tool, or you have a design where things have very sharp corners and you need to have that smoothed out. You can do that with this option. So select, modify, smooth, and you can see it's going to try to smooth that out. And the lower the number, the less smooth it'll get. The higher the number, the more. So this is 10, and you can see it just rounded off those corners for us. So that might be something that you need. We'll go back and we'll draw our rectangle here. We go to select, modify, expand, and this is going to expand outwards our selection. So let's just say 20 pixels, and it was here and it moved up a little bit because we've expanded it. So if I go back and forth, you can see it's expanding out to 20 pixels. So you might select something. One good use of this that I use pretty commonly is if I make a selection, like say I make this pair, and I'm going to copy and paste this to a new layer. Let me hide these layers real quick. I'm going to create a new layer underneath, and I'm going to fill it. And let's fill it with 50% gray. And what will often happen is you won't select enough of the pair, and you'll need to grab a little more. Sometimes what happens is when we use these kind of selection tools, because of the way that the edges fall off and the pixels start getting mixed in with the background, it has a hard time figuring out where to keep that selection. Sometimes we will need to select more, and sometimes we'll need to select less. That's what the expand and the contract can help us do. So if we go back, let's turn these off for a second. We go back to that layer and let's select it again. And let's just, for a moment, zoom in. And you can see in this area, we're not getting all of the pixels. It's actually can't figure out where the background ends and where it begins. Well, let's say that we want to capture more of this image. Well, we can go to Select, Modify, Expand, and we can expand this out, say 2 pixels, and it's going to jump outward and capture more of that. 2 might even be too much. Maybe we just need to do 1 pixel so that we can just capture that border a little better than before. Now, contracting is going to do the same thing also. If we go to modify and we contract, instead of expanding it outward, it's contracting it inward. So maybe we caught too much border here and we want to get rid of some of that and we want to come in 3 pixels, we can contract it. And it's going to contract around the whole image here. You got to keep that in mind. Maybe we wanted it to do it on the edge, but we didn't want to do it on this stem. You'll have to make those separate selections and so forth. But that is expanding and contracting. Expanding is going to expand out the selection, and contracting is going to bring it in closer. And then finally, let's go ahead and make our rectangle again. We'll go to Select, Modify, Feather, and Feather is going to be similar to smoothing, but it's going to round it off a lot more. So if we say 20 pixels, it's going to take this rectangle and it's going to round out those corners, and the more that we go down, or the higher the number that we pick, the more that it's going to round those out. So if I go to 50, you can see it's rounding them out. So smoothing is going to try to smooth out the corners, where feathering kind of more rounds out that image. Now let me pull up this other picture that I have here for you. So here we have a picture of some pears, and I have the quick selection tool selected. And with this tool, I can click and start dragging around, and it will allow me to make some selections based on pixel information here. But something else that I can do is I can make a little selection, and if I go to the top and I hit select and then grow, it will grow out that selection of pixels based on the pixel colors and information. So it grew it out a little bit. And then if I grow it again, it'll keep growing this selection more and more for me based on the pixel information, and I don't have to worry about using a brush or using my mouse. Now, something else you can do is you can make a selection of pixels or colors and then go to select and hit similar, and it's going to select everything in the scene that has similar pixels. So here you can see it's tried to pick up the rest of these pears based on that green. Now, it's not perfect because, say, this pear has some red, this pear has some whites, and so forth, but it's trying to pick out those same pixels inside of this image. So maybe I'll select some more of these, and then I'll go to select similar again, and it's going to pick up more of that for me. So that is how the different selection methods work inside of Photoshop and how you can modify them. And it just gives you more in your arsenal of ways that you can make selections, make them bigger, smaller, add borders, and so forth.